welcome back everybody. We're here back at the house, getting ready to start the next phase on the panels. Alright, so last we saw, we had done all the cutting, we had plasma cut them, 2 different panels, one by hand and one on the machine. Got them sanded down, took them back to school and primed them. So, and I only did one side, so just for demonstration purposes I didn't do the opposite side. So I'm just going to focus on one side. When you're doing your actual panels, you'll do both sides, so just be aware of that. And this will probably be the same video basically for both panels because they both get started the same way. So I'll just do one and use it for both series. So let's get started. So I'll just take out one of them. Both basically the same. And we got it set up, and I've got a little bit of wood underneath the main just to support it. The panels have a tendency to flex a bit, so it's good to have something underneath them if they want to bend a lot. Right. Also helps keep them on the bench to keep them from falling down, which they do. All right. So with these, I'm going to start sanding them. I'm going to do 2 different grits. So I'm going to start with 320. And then move to 600, and after the 600 it should be ready to paint. Okay, hopefully we don't have to reprime these. They look pretty straight, they look pretty decent. Now if for some reason you grab a piece of metal and it's got some little dents in it, or it got bent or something got dropped, that can all be repaired using finish putty and then probably repriming after that. If you can catch any of your flaws like little dents and stuff before it gets primed, you can take care of them before the priming. A lot of times you won't see them until they're primed and sanded, and then you'll find some little problems. Then you come back and fix them and then reprime. Hopefully we can just do one shot on these. So with this we're going to be doing some wet sanding. So I got some water, get a water bottle. The sandpaper I'm using is the wet or dry, so it's in the sheets with the black sanding paper on it, sanding grit on there. And we're starting with a 320, so there's a 320. So you can see the 320, and then we'll finish off with 600. Okay, and after the 600 it should be ready to go. All right, so we're also using a soft pad. So anytime you're doing any sanding, for the most part, you want to use something in between your hand and whatever you're sanding, just to eliminate any grooves left by your fingers, because your hand is not straight. You'll end up leaving marks in there. So it's good to have a soft pad. This one's a little bit thicker. A little bit more stiff. This one's thinner and is more flexible, so either one will work fine with this. The thick one would probably make it straighter. The thin one would do just as fine though. Okay, and then we're also using guide coat. So we'll guide coat it first so you can see what you're doing, and we'll do it before each different grit. Now the question is, isn't there a faster way to do it besides wet sanding by hand? Yes, there is quicker ways. One of the ways is just to use a palm sander. However, this can cause more damage than good, especially if you're doing something on a car with bodywork and stuff. You can actually dig in and into the bodywork, take out a lot of the work you did, and you have to start over again. Okay, so the best way to learn is do everything by hand. You're up close, you're personal with it, you can see all the little flaws, you can see how far you're going, and you'll know when to stop. Okay, with the power tools, things get carried away quickly, and you can actually set yourself back to where you have to redo a lot of work first. Okay, so save these for when you have a little bit more experience, a little bit of time under your belt. For now, we just stick with hand sanding as much as possible, just so we can see the process up close a little bit better, and it's a little bit slower so things don't get out of hand too quickly. Okay, so what I want to do first is guide coat it. So with the guide coat, this is just a quick drying black lacquer, and what it's there for is to see where we've been, how far to sand, how far we've already sanded, and it shows up any imperfections that we might need to sand more on or come back and repair. Okay, if we just start sanding the way it is, you're not going to know how far you've sanded. You're not going to know if you missed a spot. You're not going to know if you're taking off too much until it's too late. So with a little bit of black, it's a guide. It helps you show where you've sanded, where you need to sand more. Okay. Now with the black, you want to spray the whole thing, and I don't want to go too heavy because the more you put on, the more sanding it is to take it off. Okay. If you put it on the light, then also you're not going to be able to see what you're doing either because it'll be too light, right? So we want to find the right amount. Okay. You see, just a dusting, and you can always stop and reapply it at any point during the process if you needed to add more, if you needed to double check a section and maybe you weren't sure if it got sanded enough. You can always re-guide coat it and sand it again until you're happy with it. All right. Now with this first sanding, I'm just going to take the soft pad with the holes. Like I said, it doesn't really matter that much. This is just a little bit easier to handle sometimes. And we're going to start with 320. 320 is the more coarse of the grits. 600 is finer. Okay, so the higher the number of grit, the finer the paper is. Okay, so if we start, when we sanded this, well, first we ground it down, right? We ground down the edges with a 36 grit. So 36 is about the coarsest we'll use in the class. Then we went to an 80 grit to start sanding the surface. Okay, then we've primed it. And now we're going to a finer grit also, which is the 320, and then we'll go to 600 after that. So as you can see, it progresses from a lower number to a higher number the closer we get to paint. Okay, so 320. Now to fit these pads, okay, obviously this, if you try wrapping it up, it's going to waste a lot of paper, right? So we want to be able to utilize as much of the paper as possible without a lot of waste. Okay, so the way these are designed is to fit these. Okay, this can also be cut in different directions to fit different types of blocks, but for what we're doing right now, we're just going to take it and fold it in half, so lengthwise, fold it in half, and we're just going to line up the corner. So line up your corner, and then along that top edge, crease it, and then just while we're holding this edge, I just want to work our way down, creasing it, fold it in half the opposite way, and tear it. We don't need scissors, we don't need razor blades, all right? We don't need to look for stuff. We have our hands, we can fold it and cut it, okay? Now we have a half a sheet, which if folded into thirds, will fit these pads, okay? And with this, you have 3 sides to use. So 1, 2, 3. So as one gets worn, you flip it over and use the other side. Once that's worn, you flip this inside out and use your third one. That utilizes as much of the sandpaper as possible without wasting a lot, okay? So with it folded up, and sometimes these like to slip off, so if you wrap it around a little bit, you got something to hold right there to keep the sandpaper from coming off the pad too much, okay? So water and sanding pad with the 320 is all we need at this point, okay? Now be aware, this does get messy. We don't have to worry about dust with this. It's more of the sanding sludge that comes off. So as we're sanding, you're going to see gray sludge coming off of it. Basically, it's just the primer mixed with water, but it's going to get on your shirt, it's going to get on your pants, and it's going to get on your shoes. So cover up as much as possible. Bring in some old clothes and wear them just so that you're not ruining your good clothing, okay? Because it could come out, it might stain some. So always be aware that it could damage whatever you're wearing. Okay, so come to the class prepared. All right, so we've got it laying down flat. Got it supported underneath a little bit. I'm just going to start sanding now. I want to watch out for my edges. I don't want to sand over my edges too much because that's going to take my primer off really quickly on the edges. And I want to be able to keep as much primer on. I don't want to see a bunch of bare metal popping through. Although it will happen, we want to minimize it, okay? So with our sanding, there's a technique to it, of course. I want to keep the pad flat, especially if you're doing a flat panel. There's absolutely no reason to be standing it up and digging in, right, or using the edges. So I want to keep it flat. That's going to eliminate any grooves left by the edges or the edge of the paper, okay? I'm going to sand it in kind of a diagonal pattern, so I'm doing kind of an X pattern. Now you can sand it straight, okay, but you want to make sure that you follow up with a different direction, because if you're just sanding straight, you're going to end up with grooves, okay, left by the sanding pad just going in a straight line. Okay, so you always want to keep it mixed up. Never go in the same direction constantly. You will leave grooves, okay, so keep it mixed up. And once you sand an area, I try to kind of work my way around the panel. Once you sand an area where the black is gone, don't keep sanding that area, move on, because we don't want to take off more primer than necessary. Also, remember, we have to follow up with another grit, 600. So we don't want to take all the primer off on the first pass, okay? Leave about, you can sand 80 to 90% of the black off. Leave just a couple little spots. You don't have to get it all out on the 320. But by the 600, by the time that's done, all the black should be gone, okay? So let's get started here. You're probably wondering, what's the water for besides making a mess? The water is there to give you a little lubrication helps the sandpaper slide across the surface. It also helps the sandpaper to last a little bit longer by washing away the primer that's coming off and keeping the paper from getting clogged up. Okay, so the gray that's coming off is the sandpaper, or is the sanding sludge or the dust that's getting mixed with the water, and that's what's coming off, and that's what's going to ruin your clothing, right? So light pressure, let the sandpaper do the work, and just keep a little bit of water going. You don't need to flood it, but you don't want it to run dry, okay? If it runs dry, you'll notice it's harder to sand. There's more drag on the paper, right? So, keeping my sanding mixed up, a little bit of a cross action. As I'm along the edges, I might go a little bit straighter, right? And I want to sand up to the edge. I'm trying not to sand over it, okay? And really what I'm looking for is the black. That's all I'm watching for, is the black to see when it's gone. Okay. So like this area right here is looking really good. We can move on from there. Like I said, once an area is done, move on. Don't keep sanding the same spot over and over again. You're just wasting time, but you're also taking off material where you might have to start repriming it again. Right, so notice I'm keeping the pad flat. And as you're sanding, you're feeling the grit of the paper dig in and do the sanding. And you're going to notice as you sand, it's going to get, you're going to wear down the paper so that it's not going to grab as much, it's not going to cut as much. So start getting used to how it feels, because you're going to have to switch paper to the side that cuts better, right? If you use the paper too long on one side, you're going to start basically polishing the primer, not really sanding, because what we're trying to do is sand it. We're trying to use that grit to remove material, right? The other thing is when we get into the finer grits, we're using that scratch left by the sandpaper to get the paint to attach to. You need some sand scratches for the next layer to attach to. So if you're using paper that's too worn out, you're going to end up not getting enough scratches for that next layer to adhere to. So a little bit of water, and just give it little squirts every once in a while. Keep it flushed off, that way you can see what's going on. Now I'm going to have a little puddle on the floor here pretty quick. That's right. Okay, so you can see it's not taking too long. Just be real meticulous, watch what you're doing, pay attention to what you're doing. Now I'm going to switch sides. That one's feeling a little bit worn out just from doing that, it's a little over a quarter. So what I'm going to do, so this is the side that's worn. I'm just going to flip it over to this side, but I want to shift my paper just a little bit. And we'll continue on. So let's do over here a little bit. So you can see I'm doing straight lines, which is fine, right? But then I want to mix it up and cross over that to get rid of any of the grooves that I might have left. So you want to mix up your pattern. Okay, so as I'm sanding, one thing I just noticed is over here on the side is a dark spot that won't sand out. So what there is actually a little bit of a dip right there, a little bit of a dent, real small. I'll try sanding out a little bit, but I know it's not all going to come out. So something like that, we can, if we wanted to, we can fill it with finishing putty when we're done sanding, and then reprime. We can always just do a little spot prime where we just prime a little spot on there. We don't have to reprime the whole thing if it's not necessary. But this is what you're looking for. Okay, little spots like this, okay, that are low. Those are the ones. Now with this, we don't want to dig it out with the sandpaper because that would just make it a deeper hole, right? So the way to do those, so if you find something like that, you can continue sanding it flat, light pressure, don't push too hard, and see if it comes out. Sometimes the primer is thick enough it'll fill it, okay? But what we're looking for is either the black to disappear, and you can see it's getting smaller, or you will probably see some metal showing up around it. Once we hit metal, you stop, because you can't really sand it any further. Once you hit metal, you're not going to sand the metal anymore, right? So this one's looking pretty decent. We've about got it. I'm hitting metal on the edge, but that's not a huge deal. My main concern is getting rid of that little divot right there, and I think we got it, okay? Not bad. So you can see just by keeping it flat, and we're bringing everything around it down to the lower level where that black was. Okay, so we didn't actually take out the dent, it's still there. It's just the primer was able to surface it and fill around it. Okay, so we're doing good. So over here. So it looks like I should be able to do this one side with a half a sheet of 320. But I'll have to fill up the water bottle. It's empty already, so I'll end up going through 2 bottles of water. Give it a rinse so we can see where we're at here. We just have a little section over here. So I'll just flip it over to that last good side. Let's continue on. And we're getting lucky on this one. Most of the black is coming off on the 320 stage. Like I said, you can leave a little bit of black on there if you needed to, so you don't take off too much primer on the first pass. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good right there. We get some paper towels. All right, so I'm just going to dry it off, grab some paper towels, dry it off. And what I'm trying to do is get all the sanding sludge off. You can see all the gray that's coming off. You don't want to leave the sanding sludge, the gray that came off with the water, laying on the panel to dry. You want to get it all off and as dry as possible, because if this stuff dries on the panel, a lot of times it'll reattach itself, and it's harder to get off, right? You don't want to have to come back and resand after you're done. So get it cleaned off as much as possible and dried off to eliminate having that stuff sit on the surface. I can use the air blower to finish it off the rest of the way. All right. So after the 320, everything's looking really good actually. Even the little spot that we had, there was a low spot, came out. Looks decent. Of course, there's a little bit of edges that have gone through to bare metal, not a huge deal. Now we're going to re-guide coat it, and we're going to do 600, same thing. Guide coat it, 600 with the soft pad, and at that point make sure all the black is off, okay? But you have to make sure it's completely dried off in between the grits, so you can use the guide coat again. Don't put it on when it's still wet, all right? It won't attach. So again, I want to guide coat it, same things we did, not too heavy. Okay, not too heavy. Okay, dries up real quick. Okay, now we're ready to go with the next. So I'm going to go with 600. Got a little wet from the sanding, but we're going to do the same exact thing. Line up the corner, crease it, down the edge, fold it in half. And one thing that bugs me a lot is when I see people wasting a lot of sandpaper. They'll take a full sheet and just use one little section right in the middle of it, and the rest of it gets thrown away. So they designed the sandpaper to be torn into sections that fit the tools, okay, soft pads, blocks, whatever. So don't waste it. It does get expensive. And when the materials are gone at the school, we're out of materials, right? So since this is handy, the other one fell on the ground, I'll use the thicker pad. Same thing though, same deal. Wrap it around there. Okay, you can hang on to it on the side right there so it doesn't get away from you. Now the same exact thing. Keep the water going. And this should probably go a little bit quicker just because we've already sanded out all the texture and any little imperfections with the 320. All we're doing with this one is taking out the 320 scratches. All right, so we're not trying to repair anything with the 600. All we're doing as we go finer is take out the scratches from the previous sanding. Okay? And you're saying, well, why don't we just start with the 600 to begin with and eliminate the 320 sanding? Yes, you can sand it straight with 600. However, you're not going to get as good results because the finer grits do not sand out very well the imperfections. So if you have some little lumps or some low spots that are in the panel, the finer grits just kind of follow the contour. They don't cut through and try to straighten it out. The coarser grits are what's going to straighten out the panel, get rid of any imperfections. And realistically, it'll probably go a little bit quicker, even though you got to go through 2 or 3 different grits. The coarser grits are quicker to sand, right? You'll end up spending quite a bit of time and go through a lot of materials if you're doing the finer grits from the beginning, okay? And we'll go into sandpaper grits in another video and kind of which grits are used for what purpose. For these videos, I just want to kind of show the process on what you're going to be doing in class or what you have done in class, a little review maybe. So it's looking good. Keeping it flat, light pressure, let the sandpaper do the work, keep the water flowing. So you can see it's going fairly quick, and I'm looking for the sand scratches from the 320 in the black spray to come out. Okay, so really the only thing that I'm seeing with the black spray is 320 scratches. So the black spray actually goes down into the sand scratch, and then when we're sanding, we're taking it down to the bottom of that sand scratch. Okay, so there's half the board right there. And be aware with the finer grits, you usually do go through a little bit more sandpaper. They do wear out pretty quickly. So don't expect one piece to go very far. But again, don't waste it. The more you use it, the more you'll kind of understand how far a piece will go before you have to switch it out. Once it gets worn out too far. Let me get a little more water. And just be aware, in this industry, whether you're bodyman or painter, there's a lot of sanding that goes along with it. Okay, so if you really hate sanding, you're really going to hate doing this. Okay, it's not one of the more glamorous parts of the job, but it does have to be done. And in order to get a nice job, you have to pay extremely careful attention when you are sanding. Any imperfections you did not get out at this point are going to show up in the paint job. Okay. Now, most of the panels we're putting a lot of material on. We're doing flakes and candies and patterns and stuff, so it's going to hide a lot of flaws. However, as we move through the year and you get onto different projects, the preparation is going to be even more important, and it will show through the paint job if you're doing a poor job. Okay, so really spend some time. Like I say, most of the time spent on paint jobs is done in the preparation stage. That's where all your time is. The actual time spent painting, the actual project, is a very small amount of time, right? We can spray color on this in 5-10 minutes, but it's going to take us 3 or 4 days to get it ready. So this is all the unglamorous part of painting that nobody really gets to see, but it has to be done. So, all right, we're looking really good. Couple little spots here. This is where you really want to look at that guide coat to make sure it's all gone. I still see little tiny spots with some sand scratches. And one word about the sand scratches is, if you can see it or feel it in the primer stage, it's probably going to show through your paint. Okay, especially if you're using lighter color metallics, silvers, golds, light blues, light greens, and stuff like that with the metallic in there. They show up a lot of sand scratches. So the preparation is really important with the lighter colors of metallics and pearls. Then like single stage colors, whites, blacks, reds, solid colors, you can get away with a little bit more. Don't have to be super careful with a lot of the prep. But you always want to do a nice job. All right. It's looking pretty decent. Now, normally we would be doing both sides, of course. For a demonstration, I'm just doing one side. The other side has some other stuff on the other side. But when you're doing your panel, you'll do the same thing to both sides. Okay? Let me dry that off. Grab a couple paper towels and dry it off, and let's check out how it looks. All right, looking good. A little bit of bare metal over here on the side, kind of where we were sanding that little flaw out, but just a little bit along the edge. All the others look pretty decent. Okay, so it's still a little bit wet, but all the black is gone. No sand scratches. This one is ready for paint. Okay, so basically the same process for both panels. Whether this is, I'm going to call this one the old school paint. Old school panel, where we do the old school graphics on there. This is your first one that you do. The second one we do is with your own design, your own colors. So that'll be like the custom panel. So we'll do an old school pattern panel and a custom panel, but they both start the same way. Okay, so I'll use the same video for each series probably, because this is all identical. All right, how you prep it. The only thing that might change is some of the grits, and depending on the type of paint you're using. Okay, so we finished this off with 600, which is pretty good for most solvents. Some of the water-based we could probably get away with, but if we're doing like a water-based silver or something on here, or a gold, we might want to go to 800 grit, which is a little bit finer, just because water-based is a little more susceptible to showing some of the sand scratches. So just depends on what you're doing, what colors and what type of paint you're putting on here will kind of dictate what grits you're going to finish this off with. But for the most part, 320 and 600 works for almost everything we do at the shop. So next time you'll see the panels, we'll be at the school and we'll be getting some color on them. All right?